Welcome to the Deep Dive. We have pulled your source materials, your research, your narratives, your deepest notes off the shelf. We are locking the doors because our mission is simple: to emerge with everything you need to know about the complex worlds contained within those pages.
And today we are casting off into the surprisingly turbulent deep waters of the Chesapeake Bay. Specifically, we're anchoring ourselves in this fictional yet incredibly detailed community of St. Christopher's, Maryland.
Right.
Our source material is a remarkably rich narrative, and it focuses on the lives of the Quinn and Monroe families. We're, treating these as detailed, factual accounts of community, economic life, and frankly, some profound personal trauma that really defines the fabric of that shore.
That's it exactly. This is so much more than just a pleasant tour of the waterfront.
Yeah.
Our analysis today is it's highly specific, deeply personal. We really need to distill the core challenges, the economic realities of being a waterman, for instance.
In a declining environment, no less.
Exactly. And the incredibly tight and sometimes, suffocating bonds of a small community. But the big one is the deeply complex emotional traumas that ultimately bind these people together. So our core analytical question is really this: how do past crippling wounds relentlessly dictate present-day choices?
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to risking vulnerability and the painstaking, complicated process of building a family.
It's an investigation into not just how resilience is forged, but how and at what immense personal cost those survival mechanisms are slowly, maybe, traded for genuine human connection. And the stakes are just immense because for these characters, failure to connect means regression. It means going right back into that protective isolation that trauma demands.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Let's quickly establish the players and the setting for everyone. St. Christopher's is a town where life revolves around the tides, the crabbing season, and the enduring craft of boat building. Central to our analysis is the Quinns family. We have Ethan, who is this intensely private waterman. He's a skilled boat builder, but he is a man who is constantly, and I mean constantly, guarding his emotional perimeter.
And then juxtaposed against Ethan, we have Grace Monroe. She is just the embodiment of fierce determination. She's a single mother to her young daughter, Aubrey.
Right.
And she is constantly juggling multiple physically grueling jobs. She refuses to accept charity or dependence from anyone, even the man she clearly has feelings for.
Which is Ethan, of course. And these dynamics are all set against the backdrop of a profound recent upheaval. The Quinn family home is now shared, and very reluctantly by Ethan, by him and his two adopted brothers, Cameron and Philip.
And this necessary forced cohabitation is the direct result of a monumental family loss and a subsequent legal mandate. It's really the starting gun for all the action we see unfold.
It absolutely is.
And that shared loss brings us directly to our first major topic: the foundation of the Quinn family's current, very precarious reality, the shadow of Raymond Quinn.
Yes. So the most recent shadow hanging over everything is the death of Raymond Quinn Ray, who was the devoted father figure to Ethan, Cameron, and Philip.
And not their biological father, which is a key distinction we'll get into.
A very key distinction.
Yeah.
Ray was a former college English professor who died only 3 months prior to the beginning of these accounts. And the immediacy of that loss is why the family is still reeling. But the circumstances surrounding his death were, well, they were immediately murky. They raised a lot more questions than they answered.
That's the critical starting point. Ray's death was a single car accident, but what makes it so deeply disturbing and financially catastrophic for the family is that it occurred in broad daylight.
Right, on a perfectly dry road in March.
Exactly. The weather was not a factor. The source document suggests the car was traveling far too fast as it approached a sharp curve, and that the driver, Ray, was seemingly unable, or perhaps actively unwilling, to control the vehicle.
And it resulted in this violent impact with a telephone pole.
The crash was it was physically inexplicable. The tests confirmed there was no medical event, no stroke, no heart attack. There was no physical reason for Ray to lose control of that car.
And because the sources point to driver fault and inability or unwillingness to maintain control, the pain turned immediately financial, with just brutal consequences for the Quinns.
Brutal is the word. Because of the unexplained nature of the accident, that suspicion of a deliberate act, the insurance company seized on this ambiguity, and they refused to honor Ray's multi-tiered policy. openly suggesting suicide.
And this wasn't just some bureaucratic inconvenience, right? This was an outright accusation that Ray had abandoned his family by choice.
Yes, a profound betrayal, if it were true. And the family's response was immediate and just, visceral. They fiercely denied the suspicion of suicide, particularly Ethan.
Let's pause on that denial, because it's so rooted in what Ray represented to these boys.
Well, for Ethan and for the family as a whole, this denial was an intellectual and an emotional necessity. Ray embodied what they called the mighty Quinn ethos.
What does that mean exactly?
It means his life philosophy was always about facing problems head-on, never retreating, never giving up. He taught them resilience through confrontation. So the sources make it clear they simply could not accept that this man, who had fought so hard to give them a family and stability, would choose to abandon them.
Or end his own life.
Especially given the intense turbulence and the new guardianship responsibilities he had just taken on. To accept suicide would be to, retroactively dismiss every single lesson he had ever taught them about courage.
So it seems like rejecting the insurance payout was less about the money, though they desperately needed it, and more about defending the integrity of the man who saved them.
Precisely. It weaponized Ray's memory. The fight with the insurance company becomes this crucible for the brothers. It forces them to reaffirm Ray's legacy and their own identity as Quinns. They're not fighting for the claim check. They're fighting for the truth of their father figure.
Now, connecting Ray's legacy to the present day, we encounter a surprising and, frankly, beautiful layer of the source material. His continued guidance, which certainly treads into the territory of the supernatural.
This is one of the most fascinating layers of the source material. It's not a traditional ghost story, right? It's more like an ongoing internal monologue of morality and encouragement.
For the brothers.
For the brothers. Both Ethan and Cameron experience these visitations. Sometimes they appear as incredibly clear, vivid dreams, and other times they manifest as just sudden, undeniable waking thoughts, or these quiet mental promptings.
And what Ray offers is always positive, always guiding. It's never a haunting.
Never. He offers quiet wisdom, approval, encouragement. Ethan, who is constantly wrestling with self-doubt and isolation, repeatedly experiences Ray's presence. He'll hear Ray's voice offering approval of the new boat they're building.
Affirming his craft.
Right, or giving a tacit nod to Anna, Cam's wife. And most importantly, Ray encourages Ethan to trust his heart, to stop resisting his deep, protective feelings for Grace and Aubrey.
So it's not a haunting. It's an internalized moral compass that the living brothers cannot ignore. It keeps them tethered to Ray's values even after his death.
It acts as an external force of accountability. When Ethan attempts self-sabotage later in the narrative, it's Ray's visitation that calls him out, telling him he is actively disappointing him. Ray's legacy isn't passive memory, it's active pressure on the living to choose love over fear.
Now this legacy of rescue and protection, it brings us directly to the other major complication currently dictating the structure of the Quinn household.
Right.
And that's the recently finalized, highly conditional adoption of Seth's DeLauter.
Seth is the central catalyst for the drastic shift in the brothers' lives, and he is the reason Ethan loses his cherished solitude. Ray brought Seth home shortly before his death.
And the circumstances were fraught, to say the least.
Extremely. The sources explain that Ray did this in the immediate wake of Seth's biological mother, Gloria DeLauter, making a series of shifting, unsubstantiated accusations of sexual molestation against Ray at the college where he taught.
So wait, Ray was essentially accused of a crime that would ruin his life, and yet he returns with the alleged victim's son, taking responsibility for the child. That's a staggering act of sacrifice.
It's the ultimate expression of that mighty Quinn ethos, right? Facing the problem head-on, protecting the vulnerable child who's caught in the crossfire. The sources confirm Ray was shaken by the accusations, which were never proved and were later framed as attempts at extortion, but his immediate focus became Seth's safety.
But protecting Seth came with major legal constraints that completely disrupted the brothers' previous lives. The guardianship deal required that the three adult Quinn brothers, Cameron, Ethan, and Philip, must live under the same roof and share joint responsibilities for the boy.
This is a critical legal detail that determines the physical setting of the narrative. The court essentially mandated a full, cohesive family structure, and this forced cohabitation had an immediate and painful cost, particularly for Ethan.
Yeah, as the most solitary and trauma-averse brother, he was forced to give up his cherished, private little house, which sat right on the water.
That house was more than just real estate for Ethan, wasn't it? It represented safety, insulation, the total control over his environment that his trauma demands.
It was his fortress.
It really was. It represented security, peace, and the isolation he craved to manage his internal chaos. So giving that up and then having to rent it out for needed income was a profound psychological sacrifice.
It really demonstrates the depth of his commitment to Ray's legacy and to Seth, even as he resents the loss of his physical and emotional armor.
And that need to generate money is instantly a constant, pressing undercurrent for the entire household.
But we should acknowledge the payoff for Seth's sake. Despite the chaos and the cost, he has made incredible progress in his new life.
The transformation is truly moving. He started as this frightened boy who Ethan pessimistically expected to rabbit off, to run away the moment things got tough.
Yeah.
Now he's found stability and structure. He's formed what the sources call a tenuous bond with Cameron, who provides a more relaxed paternal presence, and he finds deep comfort in Ethan's predictable, rigorous routine, the rhythm of the waterman's life.
He's integrated himself into their working life, too.
Completely. He takes immense pride in the family boatyard. He's helping with man stuff, like crabbing with Ethan and Jim, one of the yard workers. And he's excelling in school, achieving straight A's.
Wow.
Seth's integration is crucial because he represents hope for a future defined by choice and protection rather than fear.
But he also represents a constant living reminder of the darkness Ray tried to protect them all from, which leads us directly into the psychological core of this analysis. The deep, crippling trauma that binds and threatens this new family unit.
And it's necessary to state up front that this segment deals with some truly difficult material, explicitly detailed in the sources, particularly regarding Ethan's childhood. It is the defining feature of his adult existence.
Let's start with the facts of Ethan's history then, because the scope of the abuse he endured it's almost impossible to grasp.
Ethan's history is horrific. The sources are unrelenting in their description of his biological mother, whom they explicitly describe as a monster and a whore. She subjected him to extreme physical abuse, resulting in documented injuries like a concussion, cracked ribs, and persistent, severe beatings.
And the sources document psychological and sexual abuse as well, which started when he was incredibly young.
Yes. The abuse escalated into forced sexual exploitation. She forced him to earn his keep by having sex with her clients, starting when he was only around 8 years old.
Wait.
This early repetitive trauma left him with a deep, visceral sense of defilement and a permanent inability to trust his own emotional core.
How did a child survive that? And how was he eventually rescued?
Well, his rescue, tragically, was violent. It was a mirror of the chaos he lived in. His mother ended up stabbing one of her clients and fled the scene. Ethan was found alone and ended up in a Baltimore hospital.
And this is where fate, or perhaps Providence, intervened.
Exactly. Stella Quinn, Ray's wife and a doctor at the hospital, found him. She looked at his chart, recognized the depth and nature of his trauma, and returned persistently with Ray. They eventually took him in, offering him hope, love, and stability.
Essentially creating the man he is now, giving him the name Ethan Quinn.
They saved his life, but they couldn't erase the memory or what he perceived as the genetic damage.
And that is the crux of his adult conflict. The trauma didn't just teach him fear, it taught him that he was inherently dangerous.
Yes. His core defense mechanism is this intense, paralyzing, self-loathing fear of his blood. He believes the violence, the depravity of his mother is somehow hereditary. He constantly repeats this mantra to himself: it doesn't change the blood.
So he views himself as tainted, a ticking time bomb of hereditary violence and sickness.
Exactly. He believes he is genetically marked and dangerous, tainted by the monstrous nature of his biological mother. And this conviction manifests as extreme emotional control.
Right. If he can control every aspect of his life, he can contain the potential violence within.
Which is why he prefers isolation. He resists marriage and children because he genuinely believes he is too compromised, too volatile to pass on his legacy. He tries to push away the very people who love him, convinced this is the only way to protect them from what he fundamentally believes he is a danger.
It's fascinating how this manifests in his work. A waterman's life is demanding, meticulous, physically exhausting. Is his dedication to craft, his relentless work ethic, a manifestation of this need for control?
Absolutely. His boat building isn't just a business, it's therapy. It's precision. Measured cuts, traditional methods, control over materials. He can control the grain of the wood, the placement of every plank, the tautness of every line.
So if he can create something perfect and enduring, perhaps he can prove that the chaos within him can be contained.
Or even overridden by his virtue and his labor. Yes.
This intense internal war he's fighting is central to the narrative. But unfortunately, the legacy of abuse isn't confined to Ethan's history. It actively threatens Seth in the present day. It brings that chaos right back to the front door of the Quinn house.
The sources reveal an immediate and ongoing predatory threat from Gloria DeLauter, Seth's biological mother. She initiated a classic blackmail attempt.
Wow.
She sent a letter demanding $5,000 as a sign of good intentions. This wasn't a request for assistance, it was a clear threat. She insisted that if they didn't comply, she would come back for Seth, chillingly citing Ray's previous payments to her as proof that they had the means and the willingness to play.
She is trying to leverage the vulnerability she created and the fear that Ray's death exposed. The family has lost their patriarch, and she sees weakness.
Precisely. And this is terrifying for Seth because he is keenly aware of her past. He knows her lifestyle. The sources describe his memories, the specific smells of her rooms, the atmosphere of exploitation, and the terrifying tactile memory of the fat hands of clients.
He's constantly terrified of having to rabbit off to run away again.
It's what he was accustomed to doing with her. So his stability now hinges entirely on the Quinns' promise of safety.
And his fear is a tangible daily factor the family has to address. They can't just throw money at the problem.
Because that reinforces the blackmail.
Right. They have to confront the legal, moral, and emotional ramifications of this ongoing threat.
And this is where the narrative shifts from raw emotional reaction to strategic action. And that's largely thanks to Anna, Cam's wife, who steps in with her professional social work expertise.
Anna's insight is absolutely vital here. She's not just family. She's a trained professional who understands institutionalized trauma.
As a social worker, she knows how to access the full extent of the abuse documented in Seth's medical and social service reports. So she brings this necessary, clear-headed perspective to the Quinn brothers, who would, naturally prefer to handle the problem with their fists.
And what's fascinating about her approach is that she doesn't just focus on the legal victory. She focuses on Seth's well-being and his agency.
That's the crucial distinction. Anna understands the legal landscape, that they have overwhelming evidence against Gloria DeLauter, but she emphasizes that Seth is the one who will bear the emotional cost of a court battle. He has to be the one to decide what, if anything, he wants revealed in court about his past.
So his agency and emotional survival are paramount.
Yes. She turns the decision back to the victim, empowering him within the protective framework of the family. The Quinns instinctively want to confront Gloria, but Anna provides the tactical, ethical guidance needed to protect Seth legally and emotionally.
It underscores the difficult balancing act of the Quinn family. Protection can't just be emotional or physical.
It has to be tactical, legal, and ethical, centered around the well-being of the most vulnerable member. They're learning how to be a family in the context of institutional systems that have previously failed them.
It's a powerful segment, showing that stability is constantly under siege. But moving from these intense internal family dynamics, we need to zoom out and look at the foundation that makes their entire life on the bay possible: the work.
The world of St. Christopher's, Maryland, revolves around the water, and Ethan Quinn is a true waterman. He is not just a skilled laborer, he is intrinsically connected to the bay's rhythm. Let's talk about the grueling reality of the crabbing trade, because this is where the money is, or at least where the struggle for existence happens.
A waterman's day is defined by its relentlessness. It starts before the sun, often well before dawn, and while an 8-hour shift is often considered short, the physical labor is intense, wet, and relentless. It's cold, hard work that requires precision and endurance.
And the sources give us the specific details that anchor us in the reality of the work. They are hunting for specifics. 6, the full-grown females identified by their bright red pincers, which are protected during certain seasons.
Okay, so sooks are the females.
Right. And jimmies, the males, which are identifiable by the distinctive T-shape on their underbellies. And, of course, the peelers, which are crabs that are ready to shed their hard shells.
It's highly technical, and the risk of injury is constant. The source notes the constant battle against the crabs themselves.
Oh, yeah. The sources specify the frequent need for new, heavy-duty gloves because the crabs are quick to find any hole, any weakness in the protective gear. This detail is kind of a metaphor for their lives, isn't it?
The weakness in the armor is quickly exploited.
Both physically by the crabs and emotionally by the external threats they face.
Yeah. And it's a world of tidal creeks, sudden shallows, changing seasons. But the environment itself is failing them, adding severe economic pressure.
That's the harsh reality of the bin in this era. The decline of oystering due to pervasive parasites has been catastrophic for the entire local economy. This forces Ethan to rely heavily on crabbing, which is less lucrative.
Mhm.
And critically, it forces him into an economic necessity he truly dislikes. Using his beautiful traditional skipjack, a type of historic fishing vessel, for tourist tours.
It must be galling for a purist like Ethan to use a working boat as a novelty ride for tourists.
It's a constant, necessary compromise. The skipjack is a symbol of his heritage and his craft, and reducing it to a vehicle for wealthy tourists is a direct affront to his pride as a waterman. It represents the reality of adapting to the financial decline of a traditional way of life.
So the rent from his house, the tours, it all just points to a financial pressure cooker.
It does. And once the catch is made, the local commerce begins. Ethan sells his catch to Mr. Monroe's Crab House Grace's father's business. This provides a fascinating, non-romantic friction point between Ethan and the Monroe family.
I bet.
It does. We see Ethan's competitive streak and his sharp mind for business here. He is a formidable negotiator. The sources detail a specific interaction where Pete Monroe estimates the catch at 70 bushels, attempting to undervalue it, while Ethan holds firm and accurate at 87 bushels.
He knows what he's worth.
He is as skilled a merchant as he is a waterman. He knows the worth of his labor, and he refuses to be shortchanged.
So the income from the water trade provides the foundation, but the future stability, the legacy they truly want to build, rests on their new venture, Boats by Quinn.
This is their collective vision, a classic story of three brothers pooling their highly specialized, unique skills to create a premium product.
Tell us about the business model and their first project.
Well, the company is fledgling, but its ambition is high. It's currently funded by a single wealthy client, and it is dedicated to building extremely high-quality, hand-built wooden sailboats. The first boat is a sloop, and the sources give us critical technical details that underscore their commitment to quality and tradition.
Details like lap construction, what does that signify?
Lap construction is a traditional, meticulous method. It means the planks of the hull overlap each other, ensuring immense strength and a smooth finish at the seams. It's a time-consuming technique that demands high precision. They are not taking shortcuts. They are building vessels that are meant to last for generations.
And their commitment to tradition extends to the very minute details, like the caulking.
Yes, they're using traditional caulking done with stranded cotton, which is worked into the seams to achieve a watertight seal. This is an incredibly tactile detail. Why insist on stranded cotton when modern sealants are far faster and easier?
Because for a man like Ethan, driven by the need to establish a quality legacy and impose order,
The process, the tradition, and the refusal to cut corners is a reflection of his own moral code and his need for perfection. They are building more than a boat. They are building integrity.
and the division of labor reflects their personalities perfectly, ensuring that each brother contributes his specialized skill to the venture.
Exactly. Ethan handles the design, the deep technical construction, and the intensive hands-on labor, the mast turning, the varnishing, the precision work. Cameron, the oldest, focuses on the below-decks work and speed, keen to finish the cabin in less than Philip's estimated 400 hours.
Showing his focus on efficiency.
Right. And Philip, the detail-mad brother who thrives on structure and logic, manages the business end, securing clients, handling legalities, and overseeing the complex drawings and specifications.
They are literally building their financial future and their collective identity by hand, using a shared vision to replace the fractured reality of their individual histories.
It is the unifying force in their lives. The boatyard gives them a shared external purpose that keeps the internal traumas from fully consuming them.
Now, running parallel to the Quinns' communal venture, we have Grace Monroe's singular, grueling balancing act. She is running her own one-person economy defined by radical self-sufficiency.
Grace is the embodiment of fierce independence, and she's running on fumes. To support herself and Aubrey, she juggles multiple low-wage incomes. She works as a cleaner, including for the Quinns and Mrs. West, washing windows, and as a server at Shiny's pub, often staying until closing time.
The sources mention the specific nature of her uniform at the pub, which Ethan found particularly upsetting.
Yes, she often has to wear an outfit that Ethan deemed half-naked due to its revealing nature, a necessary consequence of the pub environment designed to maximize tips, but a constant source of vulnerability for Grace.
That schedule sounds utterly exhausting. We're talking about a woman maintaining this pace while caring for a young child.
It is punishing. She is constantly tired, surviving on barely 5 hours of sleep per night and working close to 12-hour days. But this unrelenting schedule is fueled by a fierce, uncompromising pride and an almost obsessive drive to earn her keep and prove her worth.
Her transportation situation only compounds the difficulty.
Oh, her car is described as perpetually sick. It's constantly failing her, forcing her to walk long distances, sometimes carrying a sleeping Aubrey after nap time, just to get between jobs and home. She is desperately saving to buy a dependable secondhand sedan from Dave, the mechanic.
That car represents freedom and stability.
It does. And her motivation is fixed on one clear objective, one goal that justifies all this sacrifice.
Her dream of ownership.
Exactly. Her entire focus is saving enough money for a down payment on a secure place of their own before Aubrey is old enough to start school. She views this independence as non-negotiable, and her mantra, "I finish what I start," isn't just a phrase, it's a self-definition. She refuses to be financially dependent on any man or any family, which inevitably sets up the massive conflict she has with Ethan later on.
Her self-sufficiency is her emotional armor, just as Ethan's isolation is his. This refusal to accept help is rooted in a deep, painful history with her own family.
Grace's fierce independence and her reluctance to trust stems directly from an old, deep schism with her own family, the Monroes. She didn't just wake up one day and decide to do everything herself. She was effectively forced out of the nest by a perceived betrayal.
The sources trace this foundational conflict back to a specific moment when Grace was 18 or 19.
Yes, Grace had a dream. She wanted to pursue dancing in New York City. She was ready to go, but her father, Pete Monroe, refused to release her college funds. He called her dream foolishness.
And his refusal wasn't just about the money, was it?
No, it was born out of fear. He genuinely feared she would leave St. Christopher's, chase her dream, and never return. His fear of abandonment led him to crush her ambition.
That initial act of non-support, of control disguised as protection, fundamentally broke her trust in him and perhaps in men in general.
Absolutely. It set the stage for the second perceived betrayal, which was the subsequent fallout from her brief, ill-fated marriage to Jack Casey, who is Aubrey's father.
Right. P. Monroe's disapproval intensified after her pregnancy.
He thoroughly hated Jack Casey. He dismissively called him a no-account grease monkey. And while Pete showed deep, undeniable affection for his granddaughter, Aubrey, he maintained a polite but heartbreakingly distant demeanor toward Grace herself.
So she felt completely unsupported by her family when she was at her most vulnerable, pregnant, recently married to a man her father despised, and struggling financially.
Exactly. She internalized the lesson. Relying on a man or a family for security will always lead to disappointment or control.
Yeah, that is the core takeaway. Her independence became a fortress built on the ruins of her crushed dreams and her family's judgment. Her pride is the highest wall of that fortress.
It is. But the sources reveal a crucial moment of reconciliation before the climactic events with Ethan. A breakthrough that shows she is, in fact, capable of forgiveness and connection if the men in her life take responsibility.
She finally confronts Pete.
She does. She accuses him directly of leaving her high and dry, first by not supporting her dance dream, and second by not standing by her when she was pregnant. It's a painful, necessary airing of grievances.
And Pete finally breaks his silence and his emotional reserve.
He does. He admits the truth. His refusal to fund her dream wasn't judgment of her ability, it was fear. He was afraid she would go to New York and never come back. And this breakthrough, where he admits his vulnerability and his paternal fear, leads to a tearful embrace and forgiveness.
It proves that she can achieve reconciliation with the men in her life, but only when they shed their pride, admit their fear, and meet her halfway without judgment.
Which sets the stage perfectly for her relationship with Ethan. She has resolved her past patriarchal conflicts, making her ready to fight against Ethan's own brand of paternalism, and that clash happens dramatically during the attack at Shiny's pub.
The scene at the pub is an explosion of Ethan's repressed violence, clashing with Grace's determined vulnerability.
Yes, the incident occurs when Grace is working late. Steve, the bartender, rushes off because his wife has gone into labor, leaving Grace alone to deal with this insistent, drunken customer named Bob, who begins to physically harass her.
Ethan arrives, sees her trapped and vulnerable, and his reaction is immediate, primitive, and terrifying.
His rage, the sources state, is primal and primitive. This is the suppressed violence he fears in his own blood, unleashed by seeing the woman he loves threatened. He intervenes violently, tossing the man around the bar. It's not a controlled defense, it's an eruption.
It showcases his latent capacity for violence, triggered by seeing her in a position of vulnerability that resulted from her economic necessity, the very necessity she fought for.
Right, and he acts as her protector, but then, unable to process his own fear and the shame of his outburst, he immediately turns on Grace.
He projects his failure of control onto her.
Yes. Instead of gratitude, the incident sparks this massive, definitive argument. Ethan scolds her, using the language of ownership and paternalism. You're a mother, you shouldn't be working half naked, getting hit on. He's telling her she should prioritize her safety, but what he's really saying is that she shouldn't be independent if he can't control her environment.
And Grace's reaction is not sadness or fear. It is white-hot rage. She furious rebuts his paternalistic attitude, defining the terms of their conflict.
Her rebuttal centers entirely on her hard-won independence and her right to earn her own way. She throws his judgment back at him. If I wasn't working, I wouldn't have a home. She refuses to be financially dependent or emotionally patronized.
And this is the definitive statement of her character. I know exactly how much I'm worth, Ethan. Right down to the last penny.
She is telling him that her worth is determined by her actions and her labor, not by his protection or his capacity to judge her vulnerability. She refuses to be a damsel in distress, even if he saved her life. This rupture forces both of them to confront their deepest, most destructive defense mechanisms.
It creates the necessary break. Grace's independence challenges Ethan's isolation. Ethan's trauma challenges Grace's belief in her own unbreakable strength. The question becomes, can they move past their respective defense mechanisms to accept mutual vulnerability?
And this brings us to the final emotional movement of the source material, the difficult, necessary journey from defensive isolation back toward genuine connection. And the sources are clear. Ethan was so locked down by his trauma that external intervention was absolutely necessary to break his stalemate.
This is where the supporting cast steps in as covert matchmakers and amateur therapists.
Right. Enter Anna, the social worker, and Philip, the business-minded brother. They deliberately interfere, recognizing that Ethan needs a serious strategic push to overcome his self-imposed barriers.
Anna orchestrates the classic big date. She creates the perfect romantic trap.
She does. She sends Aubrey overnight with Grace's mother, Carol, leveraging that recently healed rift. She uses the transparent lie of needing a recipe to ensure Ethan shows up at Grace's house, confident that Grace will be alone.
But the setup is intensely romantic.
Oh, completely. Ethan arrives to find the house lit by flickering candlelight, and he hears weeping strings music, a deliberate atmosphere of vulnerability and quiet romance.
And Grace is presented as a visual representation of this burgeoning hope.
She is described wearing a pale pink linen dress, an image of softness and potential. The narrator describes her as looking like a rose, long and slim and just ready to bloom. This is the moment where Ethan has to drop his armor and finally verbally acknowledge the history of his feelings.
It's a powerful confession. It reveals that his distance was rooted in protection, not indifference.
He reveals that he has thought about her romantically since she was 14 years old. He explains the agonizing self-control that kept him away. He waited because he was a man when you were still a girl, and he had promised himself not to get you tangled up with me. He feared contaminating her innocence with his compromised past.
This initial confession provides hope, but Ethan's deepest fear of his blood resurfaces almost immediately, leading to a profound act of self-sabotage after their second night together.
This is the trauma reaction in its purest, most destructive form. He wakes up from a terrifying, visceral flashback, dream nauseous, trembling, entirely disconnected from the present. He is convinced, irrefutably, that his past will forever taint her, taint any relationship, and especially taint any future children they might create.
The horror of his childhood feels like a physical contagion.
It does. And so he attempts this dramatic breakup designed to push her away permanently using the one weapon he knows will work. Full, ugly disclosure of his trauma.
He reveals everything. He forces her to confront the full, horrific extent of his abuse. The beatings, the rape, his mother's absolute depravity. He insists that he must let her go for her own good.
He's trying to make her feel disgusted, to make her choose fear over love. He is trying to save her from the monster he believes he is.
But Grace, having fought so long for her independence and her sense of self-worth, refuses to accept this narrative of inherent brokenness. This is the absolute turning point of the entire story.
Her response is not pity, not submission, but white-hot rage. She is enraged that he thinks he can define her capacity for love based on his fear. She rejects his judgment entirely, calling him blind as well as stupid and pig-headed for trying to define her by his pain.
And she offers the central metaphor for her survival, the stoneware analogy.
This metaphor is the foundation of their future. She insists she is good solid stoneware, capable of surviving drops, heat, and trauma without shattering. She tells him she is absolutely not china that will break with the first shock.
Wow.
She refuses to be treated like a fool or a child. She is resilient because she survived, and she demands he recognize that resilience, not fragility, is her defining trait.
The stoneware analogy is essentially her rejection of the victim narrative. She is saying, your trauma is yours, but it doesn't define my strength and it doesn't preclude my choice to love you.
It is the ultimate rejection of his shame. She refuses to be dismissed, refused to be pitied. By demanding he see her as strong, she forces him to confront his own self-pity and his fear. She validates that his past exists, but denies its power to dictate his future.
This external validation of her strength is exactly the psychological shift Ethan needed. But he still needs two final, powerful pushes to move him past his paralysis.
The clarity comes from both ends of the Quinn timeline, the past and the future. First, Ray's visitation returns, telling Ethan plainly that he is disappointing him. Ray, the moral compass, is urging him to trust his heart and stop running.
And then the ultimate reality check comes from young Seth.
Seth, seeing the devastation Ethan has wrought by hurting Grace, confronts him, using the sharpest language a child can muster. He calls Ethan a bastard for making Grace cry.
Wow, that's gotta hit hard.
That dual pressure, the patriarch's moral judgment, and the immediate pain inflicted upon the vulnerable child he's sworn to protect forces Ethan to realize his self-isolation is actively hurting the people he loves most.
That is the definitive turning point. The realization that running from his past, trying to protect everyone through distance, is actually hurting his chosen future family more than any potential hereditary violence ever could.
It's the final surrender of the trauma-driven control. Ethan finally finds Grace, and in a deeply meaningful setting under the last gilded light of the setting sun on the bay, he apologizes for trying to clear her mark away. He apologizes for judging her worth, and he apologizes for judging his own.
And the resulting proposal is not just about marriage. It acknowledges their entire, complicated, chosen family unit, addressing all the core fears they both held.
The triple proposal is a masterclass in acknowledging reality and creating legitimacy. It is the ultimate promise. He asks 3 distinct questions, each addressing a separate layer of their shared life.
The first is simple commitment. Will you marry me?
The second addresses Grace's pride and Aubrey's legitimacy, which is vital given Grace's history of paternal disapproval. Will you give Aubrey to me? Let me give her my name. Let me be her father.
Which is a promise of complete, legitimate protection and acceptance, and a recognition of Grace's value as a mother.
Absolutely. And then the third question directly challenges Ethan's central, debilitating fear of his own blood and legacy. Will you have my children, Grace?
And Grace accepts all 3. Choosing to embrace the future, defined not by Ethan's abusive past or her struggles for independence, but by their mutual commitment to shared healing and the building of a new, resilient family structure.
The sources conclude with that resolution, the profound culmination of love and commitment conquering immense, deeply ingrained trauma. It's a powerful validation of the idea of chosen family.
Indeed. What we've seen in this incredibly deep dive is the powerful tension between crippling personal trauma, Ethan's horrific childhood, Seth's terrifying introduction to the system, and the stability provided by physical labor, the predictable rhythm of the bay, and the unshakable foundation of the family they chose to build.
Love and commitment, however long delayed, proved strong enough to conquer deep-seated emotional wounds and historical injustice.
So we've analyzed Ethan, Seth, and Grace, all wrestling with visible, raw trauma, the aftermath of violence, abandonment, and survival. But the sources give us a final, highly provocative thought, pointing toward Philip Quinn's story. The detail-oriented, business-focused brother who held the family together through the crisis.
Philip's narrative carries a hidden cost, a silent sacrifice. The sources mention he nearly died at age 13. He was shot in Baltimore and was zapped back to life by the emergency room staff.
Wow.
Like Ethan, he had his own brutal brush with the system and the streets before coming to the Quinns. And critically, he survived by keeping a secret. He refused to identify his shooter.
Why did he refuse to identify the shooter? Was it fear? Was it self-preservation?
It's unclear, but the source implies it was a calculated move to survive the streets. If Ethan and Seth's narratives show the raw, exposed wounds of early trauma wounds that they eventually must expose to heal Philip's story, which is built on keeping a secret and surviving through calculated self-interest, raises a profoundly different question for you to consider.
Which is?
What does his particular brand of resilience reveal about the hidden, long-term costs of survival and the burdens of silent sacrifice?
And how does the concept of family love evolve when built not just on protection, but on a foundation of constant threat and silent necessary secrets? That's what you have to mull over as you think about the true layered depth of the Quinn family legacy.
A heavy but essential final thought.
That was the deep dive. We'll see you next time.